Day 102, the power of seeing beyond the temporary. 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, "Since we consider and look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen, for the things that are visible are temporal, brief, and fleeting, but the things that are invisible are deathless and everlasting." Hebrews 11:27, Amplified Classic. Motivated by faith, he left Egypt behind him, being unawed and undismayed by the wrath of the king, for he never flinched, but held staunchly to his purpose, and endured steadfastly as one who gazed on him who is invisible. And lastly, Proverbs 4:20-21. "My son, attend to my words, consent and submit to my sayings. Let them not depart from your sight, keep them in the center of your heart." When you learn to see beyond the temporary, you step into a completely different dimension of faith. Most people live life overwhelmed because their attention is locked solely on what they see. Problems, pressures, deadlines, symptoms, lack, fear, and confusion. The visible world speaks loudly. It demands attention. It insists you treat it as the final authority. But the believer walking in the favor of God, the visible world is not the dominant voice. The unseen becomes more real than the seen. 2 Corinthians 4:18 reminds us that everything visible is temporary. That means whatever you see today, good or bad, is subject to change. Pressures can change, symptoms can change, your circumstances can change. Even the things that feel permanent are in truth temporary because they do not have eternal foundations. But the unseen, God's promise, His word, and His favor, these are deathless and everlasting. And when you begin to anchor your life in what cannot change, your life will rise above everything that tries to change you. Moses walked this way. Hebrews 11:27 tells us that he endured because he gazed on him who was invisible. What a powerful picture. Moses did not endure because Egypt was easy. He didn't endure because Pharaoh cooperated. He didn't endure because circumstances lined up. He endured because his attention had shifted away from what was in front of him to the God who walked within him. He saw the invisible. He saw the faithfulness of God, the covenant of God, the goodness of God, and the promise of God. And when you see the invisible, you gain strength that the visible cannot steal. This is one of the major themes of your breakout, learning to see with spiritual eyes. If your eye stays on the temporary, you'll always think small. You'll always pray small. You'll always receive small. You'll adapt to your circumstances instead of rising above them. But when the unseen becomes your focus, something changes on the inside. Confidence rises, fear loosens, hope strengthens, and favor begins to flow freely because your heart is no longer swayed by what your eyes see. Proverbs 4 tells us to attend to His words and let them not depart from your sight. The word must become the lens you see everything through. You do not deny reality, you interpret it through revelation. The doctor's report may be visible, but the healer is invisible and eternal. The pressure on your finances may be visible, but the provider, again, is invisible and eternal. The strain in relationships may be visible, but the restorer is again invisible and eternal. And when you attend to the word, your shift will change. You stop letting the temporary dictate your expectation. You let the eternal govern your believing. Seeing beyond the temporary does not mean pretending problems don't exist. It means understanding they do not have the final say. Giants exist, but God's covenant is greater. Mountains exist, but faith can move them. Storms exist, but Jesus speaks peace. The temporary may look strong, but the eternal is stronger. And when you align your vision with what God says, you become anchored in a reality that cannot be shaken. This is why imagination is so critical. Your imagination will always gravitate either to fear or to faith. It will visualize either defeat or victory. The enemy works hard to keep your imagination tied to the temporary because he knows that as long as you see yourself through the lens of the natural, you will never step into the supernatural. But when you begin to meditate on God's promises, your imagination becomes sanctified. You begin to picture yourself free and blessed, healed and restored, and walking in the fullness of God's plan, successful. You stop shrinking your dreams to match the surroundings, and you begin enlarging your surroundings to match God's promises. Learning to see beyond the temporary is not a one-time decision. It is a daily discipline of turning your attention heavenward. Every time fear tries to dominate, you refocus. When doubt whispers, you return to the Word. When circumstances grow loud, you quiet your soul and lift your eyes unto the hills from what comes your strength, which is Christ. Over time, the unseen becomes more familiar to you than the seen. Favor becomes more real than pressure. Promises become more real than problems. And God's voice becomes so loud that every other voice in your life becomes quiet. This is the life Jesus modeled. He didn't react to storms. He spoke to them. He didn't bow to lack. He multiplied abundance. He didn't tremble before sickness. He healed it. And he didn't yield to death. He conquered it. He lived anchored in the unseen, and he calls you to live the same way. When you see beyond the temporary, you begin to live like someone the world cannot explain. You become steady when others shake, confident when others fear, and bold when others retreat. You become hopeful when others despair, because you're not living from the circumstances around you. You are living from the promises within you. Make this confession with me today. Father, today I choose to lift my eyes beyond the temporary. I anchor my heart in your eternal word, your unchanging promise, your unfailing favor. I refuse to let what I see define what I believe. I gaze on the invisible God who is faithful, powerful, and present in every situation. And I receive your strength, your perspective, your victory, and your favor. In Jesus' name, amen.